16th December, 1944, Ardennes forests, west of the Siegfried Line, 1st United States Army, opposite 5th and 6th, Panzer Armies General Feldmarschall Walter Model commands the offensive. General Courtney Hodges commands 1st Army, 3 million gallons of gasoline stacked in 5-gallon jerrycans near Spa and Stavelot. Snow fell in thick curtains while German guns opened at 5:30. Across the quiet sector, 1st Army held roughly 3 million gallons of gasoline in 2 large depots directly behind the weakly held front. Quartermasters had filled every clearing around Spa and Stavelot with neat rows of cans containing 80-octane fuel. Each can weighed 38 pounds when full soldiers stacked them 4 high on wooden pallets under canvas. One depot, alone at Francorchamps, held 2 million gallons ready for issue. Trucks stood nose to tail waiting for loads that would never come forward. German planners counted on those exact dumps. 6th Panzer Army received orders to drive west, seize the depots intact and refuel for the dash to the Meuse. Every Panther tank could burn well over 100 gallons to travel 100 miles on roads. The entire army started the attack with fuel for only limited road movement at combat tempo. Capture was not a bonus, it was the only way the timetable could work. At 1st Army headquarters in Spa, Colonel Andrew McNamara received the first reports of penetration at 800 hours. He ordered the forward truckhead at Butgenbach closed immediately. No more fuel would roll east. Every available 2.5-ton truck turned west instead. 3 million gallons lay in the path of the spearhead. Summer pursuit from Normandy had emptied fuel tanks faster than ports could fill them. By December, the Red Ball Express no longer rolled yet. First, United States Army still received 1,000 long tons of gasoline every day through Cherbourg and Antwerp, through rail spurs that reached forward to Liège, and through the new pipeline that ended at Bouillon. Depots grew larger each week, until the greatest reserves sat inside the quiet Ardennes sector itself. German intelligence marked those reserves clearly. Maps carried by every Panzer column showed Spa and Stavelot depots as primary objectives after the first breakthrough. 5th Panzer Army on the southern shoulder carried identical overlays. Total German fuel, issued for the entire offensive, reached only about 4,600,000 gallons for the Ardennes offensive, less than half the amount 12th United States Army Group held in one quiet corner. On 15th December, Colonel Andrew McNamara counted 12,300 long tons of packaged gasoline under 1st Army control. 3 million gallons of that total waited in the 2 depots the enemy needed most. Quartermasters had placed them there because roads west remained open, and the front had stayed calm for 6 weeks. Fog covered the Ardennes every morning, and Allied aircraft rarely flew overhead. German columns gathered behind the Siegfried Line, with engines idling to save every possible gallon. 6th Panzer Army assembled roughly 600 tanks and assault guns plus hundreds of half-tracks and trucks, yet the army carried fuel for only limited road movement at combat tempo. Planners wrote the timetable assuming capture of Allied dumps on the 3rd day of the attack. Without that captured gasoline, the advance would stop long before the Meuse bridges. American engineers had built a long pipeline network in a matter of months. It pushed gasoline hundreds of miles from Normandy to forward depots near Liège. Rail tank cars added significant daily deliveries. Quartermasters filled 5-gallon jerrycans by hand at forward filling points and stacked them under pine trees near Spa because the ground stayed firm and roads stayed dry. Each can held exactly 5 gallons and weighed 38 pounds full. Soldiers formed human chains that passed 20,000 cans per hour from rail siding to pallet. By mid-December, the 2 depots together held 3 million gallons ready for immediate issue to divisions that now fought for survival. German commanders knew the numbers almost as well as McNamara. Every Panther tank could burn well over 100 gallons for every 100 road miles in winter conditions. A single Panzer division moving fast required 50,000 gallons per day just to keep pace. The entire offensive began with roughly 6 days of supply issued at the railhead and no secure pipeline of its own. Allied bombing had destroyed synthetic plants and rail marshalling yards for months. Tank trucks that should have followed the spearheads never left Germany because bridges lay broken behind them. When shells began falling at 5:30 on 16th December, the fog still hid everything. First Army ordered defending divisions to pull back, but 3 million gallons of gasoline could not pull back on their own. Trucks and drivers and hours were required, and no one believed enough hours remained. Colonel McNamara stood in the operations room at Spa and watched the red arrows move west across the situation map. He understood instantly that the fuel behind his headquarters now decided whether the German plan lived or died. Every available 2.5 ton truck in the Army area received orders to turn around and head east before dawn became full daylight. Drivers who had delivered ammunition the night before now raced empty toward the depots they had supplied only days earlier. 6 days of German fuel faced 3 million gallons of American fuel stacked in 5-gallon cans under snow-laden pine branches. 18th December 1944, Spa Colonel Andrew McNamara directs the largest emergency fuel evacuation of the European campaign. At 600 hours, he orders every truck within 50 miles to converge on the threatened depots. About 600 2.5-ton vehicles arrive before noon. Soldiers break stacks of 5-gallon cans in freezing rain and pass them hand to hand from pallets to truck beds. Each truck takes a heavy load, then turns west toward railheads around Liège. German spearheads have already advanced 30 miles in 48 hours. Kampfgruppe Piper races northwest after massacring prisoners at Honsfeld, his lead Panthers running on fumes. Drivers throttle back to 20 miles per hour on hills to stretch the last gallons. By nightfall, 19th December, quartermaster convoys have removed 2 million gallons from the 2 depots. Remaining stocks move north by rail or south toward the new First Army boundary. Drivers use only blackout lights, while German artillery searches the roads behind them. Snow turns to sleet and freezes on windshields. Men crack ice with rifle butts to keep wipers moving. Every loaded truck burns 20 gallons, simply reaching safety. Colonel McNamara walks the stacks at Spa himself, counting convoys out and watching rows shrink. He knows Piper is now less than 15 miles east of the town. Piper studies the map under red lamp. Spa fuel 20 kilometers ahead, enough to carry him to Antwerp. 19th December, engineers prepare denial. They roll 55-gallon drums to the eastern edge of Stavelot and bore holes in the sides. 20th December, the last convoy leaves Spa, carrying 800,000 gallons in jerrycans lashed 4 layers deep. Drivers shift gears without clutch because transmissions have frozen solid. One column reaches Francorchamps as German reconnaissance appears on the ridge above. Soldiers throw the final cans aboard moving trucks while machine guns open fire from the tree line. The train waiting at Stavelot takes direct hits from 88mm shells, yet the locomotive pulls away with 30 boxcars full. 20th December dawn, only 120,000 gallons remain forward. Engineers pour the contents across the main road east of Stavelot in a strip 1,000 feet long and 4 inches deep. A single tracer round ignites the lake. Black smoke rises 2,000 feet and drifts east on the wind. Piper halts before the burning barrier while temperature drops below zero. Flames melt snow for 50 yards on either side. German crews watch from hilltops and understand the prize has vanished. Back at Spa, headquarters prepares to move. Clerks burn files in courtyard drums, while drivers top off staff cars from the last pump. Colonel McNamara signs the final evacuation order at 1400 hours 20th December. Every major dump is empty or burning. About 600 trucks have made repeated round trips in 72 hours. Men sleep for minutes leaning against wheels, faces black with exhaustion and oil. One driver completes 400 miles without stopping except to load and unload. Another wakes in a ditch with 2,000 gallons still aboard. German columns detour around the fire and lose another day. American trucks keep rolling west under the smoke of their own making. 3 million gallons have become 300 miles of safe distance. Depot soldiers who had never fired a shot in anger now lifted 38-pound cans for 14 hours straight until shoulders bled through wool shirts. Truck drivers ran engines without oil changes and drove on roads glazed with ice while German shells burst overhead. Men passed cans along human chains that stretched 100 yards from stack to tailgate, each can swinging between frozen hands until it landed aboard with a metallic clang. Every 2.5-ton truck left the loading area carrying 2,000 gallons and returned empty 6 hours later to do it again. Drivers chewed benzodrine tablets to stay awake and kept one hand on the wheel while the other wiped blood from split knuckles. Exhaust pipes glowed dull red from constant running, and radiators boiled even at 10 degrees below zero. 20th December night, Kampfgruppe Piper reached the burning gasoline lake east of Stavelot and stopped dead. Flames roared 30 feet high across the only paved road, heat strong enough to blister paint on lead Panthers 50 yards away. German drivers shut engines down to save fuel and waited for engineers who never came. Piper walked forward through snow turned orange by fire and stared at black smoke that carried away the gallons his division needed to live. Behind him, 800 vehicles idled or sat silent, fuel gauges resting on empty. Some tanks carried 30 gallons each, barely enough for 25 miles on roads now blocked by American fire. At Spa, the last train pulled out under small arms fire that stitched sparks across boilerplate. 30 boxcars carried 800,000 gallons west, while tracer rounds arced overhead. Engineers detonated charges that dropped the remaining sheds into their own cellars and walked away carrying only detonators and frozen fingers. Colonel Andrew McNamara rode in the final staff car as Spa disappeared behind drifting smoke. He had saved or destroyed every gallon. First Army placed in the German path. 3 days earlier, 3 million gallons waited in neat rows under pine trees. Now only ash and charred earth remained. German crews siphoned fuel from damaged vehicles and poured it into the least wounded tanks. One Tiger received 15 gallons taken from 3 wrecked half-tracks and still could not move because both final drives had seized from cold and overuse. Men stood beside machines they had trained on for years and understood the war had become a question of gasoline instead of courage. Across the Bulge, Panzer companies counted litres instead of kilometres and waited for trucks that Allied fighter bombers had already burned on rear area roads. American drivers kept moving west through the night. One convoy passed the same crossroads 4 times in 24 hours, each time loaded heavier than the last. Another driver fell asleep at the wheel near Werbermont and woke to find his truck still rolling straight because the column ahead had never stopped. Men learned to sleep in 10-minute bursts between gear changes and still delivered 2,000 gallons every trip. By 21st December, the great stacks at Spa and Stavelot existed only in German planning maps and American memory. Well over 100 gallons moved one Panther 100 road miles. 3 million gallons moved an entire army out of reach. 22nd December 1944 roads west of St. Vith's 6th Panzer Army fuel state falls below 20% across all divisions. Panzer regiments report tanks with less than 30 gallons remaining, half-tracks abandoned after crews drain them dry, artillery batteries silent because prime movers sit on empty. Supply columns promised for the 3rd day never appear. Allied fighter bombers find clear skies and tear horse-drawn wagons to splinters 50 miles behind the front. German commanders order vehicles parked in woods and fuel transferred forward by hand, 1 5-gallon can at a time carried through snow by freezing infantry. Kampfgruppe Piper reaches La Glaise with 8 operational Panthers and almost no gasoline left in the entire column. Men siphon every wrecked vehicle within reach and still collect barely enough to move 3 tanks. American infantry close the ring, while German crews destroy turrets rather than let machines fall intact. Piper orders the rest burned where they sit, hatches open, fuel tanks showing nothing but air. Across the northern shoulder, the same scene repeats in smaller scale. Panzer companies become static strongpoints because engines will not turn. 5th Panzer Army on the southern flank fares little better. Lead elements reach positions only a few miles short of the Meuse and halt. Drivers receive orders to remove 1 track block from every 4th tank so the vehicle cannot move, even if fuel arrives later. Crews stand beside silent armor and watch American columns pass on parallel roads, headlights blazing trucks running at 40 miles per hour without fear of empty gauges. German soldiers who believed speed and shock would carry them to Antwerp now count snowflakes instead of kilometers. American pipelines keep pumping large daily fuel tonnages into new depots west of the Meuse. Rail tank cars roll forward again the moment tracks are repaired. Quartermasters issue full rations of gasoline, while German divisions burn furniture in stoves because diesel has run out. One Panzer division records exactly 600 gallons delivered on 24th December, enough for 4 tanks to travel 20 miles each. The rest wait under pine branches that offer no warmth and no movement. Panther tank could burn well over 100 gallons per 100 road miles in winter mud. By 26th December, the German advance ends completely. Abandoned Tigers line frozen roads like broken monuments. Fuel caps remove tanks showing only rust and ice inside. Crews walk east carrying rifles because there is nothing left to drive. 26th December 1944. The German offensive stops only a few miles short of the Meuse bridges. 6th Panzer Army counts fewer than 100 running tanks from the roughly 600 that crossed the start line 10 days earlier. Most machines sit abandoned with engines, cold fuel tanks, dry tracks thrown or deliberately broken so they cannot be recovered. Crews pour the last litres from jerrycans into staff cars and drive east, leaving Panthers and Tigers as frozen hulks beside roads already drifted with snow. The romantic picture of armoured spearheads slicing through Allied lines collapses into a simpler truth. Without continuous gasoline, even the heaviest tank becomes nothing more than an immobile steel pillbox. American quartermasters have moved or destroyed every major dump the enemy marked on their maps. New depots open daily behind the Meuse, each receiving large deliveries from the pipeline system that never paused. First, United States Army issues full fuel rations while German divisions ration matches to start cooking fires. One captured German supply officer stares at American trucks passing in endless columns and asks through an interpreter how many gallons the enemy possesses. The interpreter answers simply that no one counts anymore because the tanks never run dry. Clear skies return after Christmas, and Allied fighter bombers hunt anything that moves on German roads. Each destroyed fuel truck removes another 100 gallons that will never reach the front. Horse-drawn artillery pieces lie overturned in ditches drivers shot while trying to unhitch teams from burning wagons. German commanders send frantic radio messages demanding fuel that no longer exists anywhere behind them. Panzer regiments report readiness in single digits, the rest of the machines wait for gasoline that will never come. The initial stockpile of about 6 days of fuel carried the offensive through its first week. The great gamble ends not in tactical defeat, but in mechanical silence. Engines that once roared across France now refuse to turn for lack of a few gallons. Crews who trained for years to fight fluid battles now dig frozen earth with mess tins because their tanks cannot move 100 yards. The Ardennes forests echo with nothing except wind moving through empty turrets. January 1945, the Bulge disappears under relentless American counterattacks and drifting snow. German armoured strength drops from over 1,000 tanks committed on 16th December to fewer than 400. Still capable of movement, most losses recorded as abandoned rather than destroyed by enemy fire. Empty fuel tanks and thrown tracks mark the high-water line of the offensive more clearly than any map arrow. 6th Panzer Army withdraws what remains across the same roads it advanced along 10 days earlier, leaving behind hundreds of armoured vehicles that simply ran dry and could not be towed. Colonel Andrew McNamara receives the Distinguished Service Medal for evacuating or destroying 3 million gallons under direct threat and denying the enemy operational mobility for the first time in the campaign. The Stavelot operation enters United States Army quartermaster doctrine as the model for emergency depot denial when tactical retreat becomes necessary. Officers study the movement of hundreds of trucks making repeated round trips in 72 hours while under artillery fire and conclude that speed of decision saved more combat power than any division on the northern shoulder. American logistics never pauses. The pipeline from Normandy reaches forward again and pumps large daily volumes of gasoline into new depots that spring up overnight west of the Meuse. Rail tank cars roll east the moment German troops leave the tracks. By late January, 1st United States Army holds greater fuel reserves than it possessed before 16th December, while German Panzer divisions count surviving tanks in dozens instead of hundreds. Post-war German accounts written by surviving generals list fuel shortage first among causes of failure. They describe the exact moment each division halted, the precise number of gallons remaining, and the map coordinates where the advance died. American official histories record that quartermasters kept 3 million gallons under Allied control and forced the enemy to fight the last 8 days of the offensive on captured dribbles and fumes. The Ardennes proves with final clarity that modern war runs on gasoline measured in millions of gallons delivered daily, not on tactical brilliance or courage alone. The side that moved 3 million gallons west in jerrycans and burning lakes won the battle before most rifles fired in anger. The side that started with 6 days of fuel and counted on capture lost everything when the cans were gone.